YouTube, welcome to Groove Builders. I'm Disorderly Cone, and in this episode, we're adding another building to our skyline. This building originally started construction in 1173 in the city of Pisa, Italy. That's right, we're building the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Groovers, let's take a look at the package. Boom! On the front, you're going to see this is the basic metal earth packaging. That's that grayscale you see here at the top. A really nice depiction of the Tower of Pisa itself and what it's going to be looking like when we're completed. On the back, we get a nice little history blurb of the tower as well as some instructions on the insertion holes and tabs. Let's go ahead and read the back. The Tower of Pisa. The Leaning Tower of Pisa, known worldwide for its unintended tilt to one side, is the freestanding bell tower of the cathedral in the Italian city of Pisa. Work on the ground floor of the white marble chapel began on August 8th, 1173. Groovers, let's go ahead and rip this open.
Alrighty, Groove Builders, welcome to the workbench. If you guys love tubes, this is the build for you, the Tower of Pisa. Let's go ahead and look at the back. At the very top, we have that nice history blurb we just finished reading. A little bit further on down, you have insertion holes and tabs. Groovers, let's go ahead and open it up. First thing we're going to see is our instructions, and then our metal. Just one really nicely detailed piece of metal for the Leaning Tower. Now these instructions, we're going to go ahead and open them up and take a quick little look at them. Looks like it's a lot of repetition with making tubes. At the very top, you see this little QWERTY code. That will give us a 360 view of the tower if we so want to have that. A little further on down, this is going to show us the insertion holes and the tabs and how we're going to be working into this particular tower. A little on further down, these circles here are going to tell us when we need to fold the tablets down, and the triangles are when we need to pull and twist the tabs. Alright guys, let's go ahead and start working on this Leaning Tower of Pisa. And we start with our floor pieces. Now Groove Builders, make sure we're taking the right ones out of the metal here, as the floor pieces are only different by insertion holes in different locations. Just double check your work and you should be fine. The next thing we're going to be doing is cutting out these walls. Again, double checking our pieces to make sure we're not cutting out the wrong ones. When it comes to forming the walls, you really want to get any kind of cylindrical object to help you. With a mandrel, it's very important to use all of your pressure to get a really nice consistent cylinder. Afterwards, you want to bend that little tab at the end to almost make a locking mechanism to make sure you have a nice secure fit. This is very, very important to not have any loose parts. Let's go ahead and combine the wall and the floor. If you found your wall to be a little bit out of shape, don't worry, you can use the floor to help you fix it. And just like the first one, we're going to do this 2 more times. Now, Groove Builders, I'm going to speed up this process for us so we're not wasting too much time on this. But if you do find yourself making a mistake and misshaping one of our cylinders here, just use a pen to help you correct it. You want to correct it now before you go on to any other steps. Alrighty, Groove Builders, the next few steps are pretty much the same thing as we've done before. You know, when the Tower of Pisa was originally being constructed in 1173, it was pretty much doomed from the beginning. And we're talking pretty early in construction. By the 3rd floor, the tower had already begun its tilt. And over the years, even though there was some wars and things that got in the way of the tower's funding and construction, they came up with some pretty unique ideas to try to fix this tilt, including making some of the pillars longer on some sides and other parts shorter. Now, if you were to fully correct the tower upright, it would have a really interesting bend in the middle. Okay, Groovers, installing the lower walls can be a little bit tricky. Just make sure you take your time and line up those tabs. When you're folding the tabs, make sure you put them out of the way. You need to keep in mind that we're going to be putting pillars all the way around the outside, and you don't want those tabs to get in the way. Insert and fold these last couple of tabs, and there we go, we have all 3 completed. Now comes the familiar task of attaching these pieces together with that little metal ring. Like we've done in the past couple of steps, what's really key here is to force the tabs into the middle of the tower. And the reason for this is because you're going to be attaching the next set on top. And those tabs are going to be fed on just the outskirts of the wall you have installed. It's very important at the end of the installation to bend the tabs away from where the pillars are going to be. Okay, now we're going to do the exact same thing for the top half. Would you look at that, our Tower of Pisa is coming along quite well. let's go ahead and start working on the lower half. That of course means we're going back to our metal to cut out the main floor and the supporting ring. And just like the other rings, you want to make sure the tabs are bent towards the middle. Bending the first floor piece can be a little bit tricky, and that's because it's very detailed. The little archways actually provide a little bit of structural integrity to the piece, making it very difficult to get a nice cylindrical shape. Just remember to use even strength all the way around, and you can go back and form it later if it gets a little crooked. Making sure we're inserting the right side into the model. Go one tab at a time and fold her in. You can see how mine's a little bit square. I will round that out a little bit later on. This top piece can also be a little bit tricky, and again, that's because of the etched detail all around the top half. Just take your time and again, use a lot of pressure to make sure you get a really nice cylindrical bend. This part might drive you a little bit nuts, but if you have a very nice cylindrical piece, it shouldn't be a real problem. Just start with the back tab first, and then work left and right, then we can close the tower on the front. And just like we've done before, we're going to attach that ring onto the top, followed by the top half of the tower, making sure she's really nice and tight. Sliding the tabs into place and securing them. Make sure they're out of the way of the pillars we're going to be installing a little bit later. With the tower of Pisa basically constructed, we're going to go ahead and cut out all of our remaining pieces, and that means those little pillar pieces too. Just take a little bit of caution when you're cutting these out, as they're very easy to warp. Can't forget about our base. Speaking of which, let's start with the base. The base is pretty simple to construct with just 4 90-degree bends. You can pretty much use anything in your house to do this, your table, tweezers, or pliers. I use my tweezers because they're nice and long, but a pair of pliers can work really nice as well. 4 tabs along the bottom. Make sure you pull and twist when you do this part. Before we go any further, we're going to make sure all of our connections are super tight. Excellent. Let's go ahead and move on to the pillars. And just like we formed the other pieces, we want to make sure we're providing even pressure as we're making the piece. You want these pieces to almost come off in a giant spiral if you can. Pull it over the tower. Insert the tabs along the top half of the floor. Lock it into place. And then bend all the tabs down on the floor. There, that wasn't too bad. Now we're just going to repeat this step a few more times. Keeping in mind that the tabs that are going on there need to be out of the way of the next piece going on. I recommend bending the tabs toward the center of the piece like we did before.
Alright Groove Builders, we did it. We built the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and while this build might be a little small, it definitely has a ton of detail in it. Let's go ahead and talk about it. The first thing we're going to be talking about is construction difficulty. And while this model wasn't incredibly difficult to build, it definitely had its fair share of cylinders. By the second or third cylinder though, you should be almost an expert in how to build them. My suggestion is to find a really good tool that will help you make a really good cylinder. Using the mandrel like I had in my video is definitely a good way of getting a consistent bend, which is key for all metal model building. One other thing to look out for is when you're connecting the floor to the wall, it's important to make sure that the tabs that you're bending aren't going to be blocking any other pieces that you're putting on. This can be done by looking at the directions and going a little bit further ahead. If you can see where you're going to be putting pieces on in the future, you can avoid any kind of mishaps where you're having to take apart the entire model just to fix one piece. The second thing I want to talk about is the building time. This particular model didn't take that long, even though it had a ton of detail and a ton of tubes. It took me about an hour and 30 minutes to get the whole thing completed, and I can actually recommend this model for some of the newer people out there that are just getting into these metal models. Alright Groove Builders, that brings us to the end. I had a really good time building the Tower of Pisa with you guys today, and if you guys had a good time, don't forget to press that like button. For more videos like this, hit subscribe as well, as we got all kinds of really cool stuff coming out in the future. Until next time, Groove Builders, keep building!